The Israeli economic losses incurred by Israel during the past 11 days of its military offensive against civilians in Gaza amount to $2.14 billion. The figure is an unofficial preliminary estimate, and is equivalent to about 0.5% of the gross domestic product. The latest offensive was accompanied by reduced production in factories and a significant decrease in public consumption. According to the Central Bureau of Statistics on Tuesday, the Israeli economy contracted by 6.5% in the first quarter. Economists have warned that renewed fighting between Israel and the Palestinians could hit the post-pandemic economic recovery. At least 230 Palestinians, including 65 children, were killed during the 10 days of Israel's military offensive, which began on the 10th of May. More than 1,500 people were wounded. A ceasefire came into force at 2 a.m. local time on Friday, 21st of May. Israeli newspaper Yedioth Ahronoth has said that Israel is making approximately $37 million in direct economic losses each day it is bombing Gaza. The Israeli newspaper saying that over the first 8 days of its bombing campaign of Gaza, Israel has suffered losses equal to those it made during its 50-day war on the besieged Gaza Strip in 2014. Inflicted on Israel due to the daily fighting with the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip estimated by $37 million per day. The Israeli newspaper Yedioth Ahronoth saying that 8 days of fighting cost Israel losses almost equal to the losses of 51 days of war on Gaza in 2014. The newspaper reported that more than 6,000 Israelis had applied for compensation for damages to their homes, furniture, vehicles, and properties. Factories, warehouses, companies, shops, and agricultural projects in the area around Gaza have incurred heavy losses due to the Palestinians' rockets. Over the first 8 days of what Israel has codenamed Operation Guardian of Walls, Palestinian resistance factions have launched 4,500 rockets towards Israel, compared to about 4,500 throughout the 2014 war on the enclave. As a result, in 2014 private property losses were estimated to have reached 200 shekels, $61 million, compared to $120 million, $37 million, per day this year. Speaking to the Jerusalem Post newspaper, missile expert Uzi Rubin estimated the cost of the short-range Qassam rockets fired by Hamas to be somewhere between $300 to $800 each. Rubin, an Israeli defense engineer, pointed out that Hamas' best rockets are relatively simply made and inexpensive. Meanwhile, Tal Inbar, former chairman of the Fisher Institute's Space Research Center, estimated the cost of Israel's defense system, the Iron Dome's interceptors, to be between $50,000 and $100,000 each. Hamas' longer-range rockets are only 2 to 3 times more expensive than its shorter-range rockets, he added, calculating their cost as a few $1,000s each. Since the start of the ongoing Israeli offensive on Gaza on May 10, the Palestinian Ministry of Health reported 217 deaths, including 63 children, 36 women, and 16 elderly, in addition to 1,500 wounded, including 50 who are in a critical condition. 10 Israelis have also been killed.
Israel's rating was confirmed by S&P over the weekend and left at the A level, while half of the country, including the economic capital Tel Aviv, is under attack by Hamas missiles is no small thing. The future rating forecast has also not changed and remains at a stable level. This is a significant expression of confidence in the Israeli economy. The message conveyed by S&P is clear, according to which the Israeli economy is a strong economy despite the geopolitical risks it faces. But this time this statement took on a new meaning, given the fact that it is clear to everyone that the current round of fighting is different because of the tensions between the Palestinians, Arabs and Israelis within Israel, which led to riots not seen on city streets and roads for almost a generation. This fact did not escape the eyes of the ranks. The security and political risks have been greatly exacerbated in recent days. Nevertheless, the combination of a very effective and rapid vaccine campaign against the coronavirus, the impressive performance of local high-tech and gas exports are expected to establish a 5% steady economic growth process in 2021, the company economists wrote. While clarifying that this statement is based on a working assumption that the military confrontation and internal tensions will soon end. Israel's international credit from rating agencies and foreign investors is the result of a 15-year planned macroeconomic policy, based on clear principles of employment-oriented growth, deficit control, and a declining debt outline, accompanied by structural reforms alongside a thriving high-tech industry. It all ended in 2018. It can be said that at this point high-tech is the only one left, and he is alone in the campaign. Israel has not had a functioning government for 2.5 years, the country is running for a fifth election, the deficit, which stands at 11.7% of GDP, is the highest in history, and the structural deficit is one of the highest in the OECD. In addition, no one is formulating a macroeconomic strategy, the Ministry of Finance is depriving senior officials and some of the jobs are still staffed in place, and there is no one to formulate structural reforms that will advance the economy. Therefore, do not get confused, the confirmation of the ranking comes despite the last 2 years and relies on the fumes of the 15 years that preceded them. For the time being, Israel's economy exists on borrowed time, regardless of the round of fighting in Gaza. When the tanks are roaring, the budget department is silent. The debates between the directors of the division and the Ministry of Defense will begin to be heard on the day the IDF submits the bill on the Israeli attack against the Palestinians in Gaza. The cost of an hour of flight for each of the 160 aircraft that participated in the tunnel destruction operation is NIS 150,000. Each Tamir missile, the Iron Dome interceptor missile, costs $80,000 to $90,000, and the
Wow! ¡Ímale! 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 ¡Regresó!
Israel's economy contracted by 6.5% in the first quarter, the Central Bureau of Statistics, as economists warned that renewed fighting between Israel and Palestinian militants could curb its economic recovery from the pandemic. After posting a better-than-expected 2.6% contraction in 2020, Israel's economy was projected to grow between 5% and 7% this year on the heels of a rapid vaccination rollout that has led to a nearly full reopening of businesses after emerging from a third lockdown in mid-March. But data published showed gross domestic product shrank more than expected in the January-March period from the prior quarter and was in contrast to expectations of 3.6% growth forecast in a Reuters poll of analysts. Consumer and government spending and investment fell in the quarter, while exports rose. At the same time, Israel's economy, in which the jobless rate fell below 8% in April and inflation stands at 0.8%, is losing close to 200 million shekels, $61 million, a day from a conflict between Israel and Hamas militants in the Gaza Strip that has entered a second week. Ofer Klein, head of economics and research at Harrell Insurance and Finance, after the GDP data cut his 2021 growth estimate to 4.2% from 5%, mainly on lower consumer spending expectations. Liam Peach, emerging markets economist at Capital Economics, is maintaining a 7% estimate for now. With the economy starting the year on weak footing and an extended military conflict a growing concern, the risks to our forecast for GDP growth this year are skewed firmly to the downside, Peach said. An extended military conflict weighs on sentiment and disrupts activity in large parts of the economy. Klein noted that the first quarter would have been worse if not for solid high-tech exports. He anticipates an economic rebound in the second quarter given positive data since April. Growth figures from the first quarter are less relevant today, especially since we know there has been a very large change in economic conditions since then with the end of the lockdown, he said. Last week, Bank of Israel Governor Amir Yaron told Reuters Israel's economy was remained on track for 6.3% growth in 2021 as long as there is no new mutation of the coronavirus that is detrimental. Read more. Over the first quarter of 2020, GDP fell 0.5%. The Bureau revised fourth quarter GDP to annualized growth of 6.3% from 6.5%. Israel's economy contracted by 6.5% in the first quarter in the face of the coronavirus pandemic, the Central Bureau of Statistics said, and economists have warned that the fighting between Israel and Palestinian militants could curb its economic recovery from the health crisis. Israel's Manufacturers Association said on May 13 that the loss to the economy between May 11 to 13 reached 540 million shekels, $166 million, because the south and center of the country came under intense rocket fire from Gaza. That figure excluded any damage to factories. Israeli industry continues to produce under fire and with a low turnout of workers, its president Ron Tomer said. Israel's central bank, finance ministry, and manufacturers association said they did not as of yet have up-to-date data on full economic damage caused by rockets from Gaza. Trade and shipping sources have said some tankers had to divert to other Israeli ports because of the rockets, delaying delivery of fuel. Last week a pipeline belonging to an Israeli state-owned energy company was hit in a rocket attack. Many international airlines suspended flights to and from Israel's main Ben Gurion airport near Tel Aviv, while others were diverted to Ramon Airport near Eilat, several hours' drive away. During the last major hostilities between Israel and Hamas, a 2014 war that lasted 7 weeks, Israel's central bank estimated the country's economy took a 3.5 billion shekel hit, plus nearly the same amount in damage to the tourism sector.
صاحية ونسلت أولادي من البيت. يعني هذه تقريبا كم مش عيش 2014 انقسم و2021 برضه انقسم. يعني لا هم أولاد قائد كبار ولا هم قسام كبار ولا هم حاجة.